So you're moving to the Oregon coast? Well, today we're talking about two towns about 30 minutes away from each other that get compared a lot. We're talking about Lincoln City and Newport, Oregon. Comparing the two, what's better, what's worse, and stick around to the end because we're going to talk about the housing market in these two towns. We're getting into that right now. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Clem with the Home Team Brokers coming to you from the Oregon coast. And if this is your first time to the channel, living on the Oregon coast, make sure to hit the subscribe button, tap the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. People reach out to us all the time who are thinking about relocating to the Oregon coast, buying a second home, vacation home. We love to hear from you. So if that's you, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, or click the link below in the description of this video and schedule a Zoom call with us. However you decide to get a hold of us, we would love to help with your move to the Oregon coast. All right, so Lincoln City and Newport, two phenomenal towns. You know, we've been doing this for quite a while and talked to a lot of people who are relocating to the Oregon coast. These are two towns that tend to come up quite a bit, not just because of their size and maybe a little bit more availability as far as housing inventory, but because there is so much to offer. They're centrally located. Lincoln City kind of bumps up into the northern Oregon coast region. Newport is securely in that central Oregon coast region, but again, they're about 30 minutes apart, so very similar, both in Lincoln County. Both towns have about 10,000 people, so they feel similar in size to some extent, although I would say that Lincoln City feels bigger than it is population-wise, and Newport feels like a quintessential Oregon coast town. So because they're so close in proximity, both towns have pretty similar landscape and just kind of the overall aesthetic in terms of where you are on the Oregon coast. But Lincoln City, I mean, this is a town that was incorporated back in the 1960s, so not that long ago, and it was a series of I think 5 or 6 different towns that all incorporated eventually and became Lincoln City. So you really feel that as you're driving up and down the highway, up and down 101, where you get into these different neighborhoods, and if you just based it on your drive on the highway on that stretch of 101, you go for quite a while, and it feels like this town is really, really big. Now in Newport, you kind of have a centrally located downtown area. You have a few different neighborhoods. You have like Agate Beach, and you have Nye Beach, of course, which we'll talk about, and you have South Beach. So you have these distinct areas which are neighborhoods, but the main area in particular for tourism is right on Bay Boulevard on Yaquina Bay. So this is where you're going to get Ripley's Believe It or Not. You're going to get the Wax Museum, restaurants, a lot of well, call it tourist trap or just tourism activities on the bay, actually, which is unique because a lot of Oregon coast towns that are situated right on the coast, right on the beach, you're going to be a lot closer to the beach. That's not to say that in Newport there's not a lot of great beach areas, which there are. In Lincoln City, you kind of lack that distinct downtown area. There's not as much of a cohesive feel as you get in a place like Newport. Again, it's a really long stretch of the highway. I think Lincoln City is only about 6 square miles, whereas Newport is actually about 10 square miles. So Newport's bigger as far as its geographical footprint, but Lincoln City is just a long skinny strip along the coastline, which means that if you have a town that stretches really far north and south, you get a lot of beaches. People in Lincoln City like to boast about the 7 miles of coastline, and it's really incredible. Really, anywhere you are in Lincoln City, there's a ton of beachfront properties, probably more so than Newport. and a lot of access to the beach. So Lincoln City, as far as just kind of, you know, the vastness, the stretch of beaches that you get, probably takes the cake, you know, probably wins that one as far as beaches go, but the beaches in Newport are incredible. Again, you have like Agate Beach, Nye Beach, South Beach, and even north of Newport, you have like Beverly Beach. So, you know, there are long stretches of beaches in Newport as well. The access might be, you know, slightly less, you know, not quite as much as you can get in Lincoln City, but it's more or less a wash, I would say, especially if you're coming from an area where you're not on a coastline. I mean, the beaches here are incredible in either Lincoln City or Newport, and we're going to talk more about that too in this video. But Lincoln City feels more spread out. It doesn't, you know, really have that cohesive downtown area. Newport has, again, Bay Boulevard, and you also have Nye Beach, which is a great little neighborhood with shops and restaurants and also residential areas right around it. All right, so let's talk about things to do. You're on the Oregon coast, so obviously you have the beach, and that's what draws a lot of people to the area. You want those ocean views, you want to be able to go to the beach, walk to the beach, hang out on the beach. You know, that's what draws people to the Oregon coast for sure. Both areas are really heavy on tourism. There's no doubt about that. I think Lincoln City probably gets more day trippers and more second homes, vacation homes in terms of ownership from people in Portland. But both areas do offer a lot to do. In Lincoln City, of course, you have the casino. I mean, that's unique. Not every town on the Oregon coast has a casino. You can get one in Florence, but you know, that's a pretty far drive from Lincoln City. You have the Kite Festival every year. I think there's a summer festival and a fall kite festival. So that's a huge draw to the area. Really fun. You also have in Lincoln City the Outlet Mall, which definitely is a tourist attraction, but if you live there, it's great to have a lot of good retail shops there. I think in Lincoln City, you probably have some bigger parks in proximity. You probably have access to some better hiking in proximity. So as far as some of those outdoor activities, aside from just being on the beach, Lincoln City probably has a little more to get out and explore. But in Newport, you know, again, Newport tends to be a little bit more of a touristy area, or at least that's the feel that you get when you're there. On Bay Boulevard, you have Ripley's Believe It or Not and the Wax Museum. You know, I grew up going there as a kid, huge attractions. You have the sea lions, you know, that are down there that are really fun to see. You have a lot of great restaurants there. And again, that's situated on the Yaquina Bay. So a little bit different as far as kind of that beachfront activities, but then you get into Nye Beach, which is a really great, centrally located, very desirable area, not just for tourism, but you know, it's a great place to live if you're a full-time resident. There's little coffee shops, restaurants, shops, boutiques, things like that. So there is a lot to do there in Newport as well. So Newport probably has a few more big box stores, and Lincoln City is maybe a little more kind of local as far as what you can get, but both places have plenty of options as far as your shopping goes. Also, Newport has the Oregon Coast Aquarium. Phenomenal. This is where, if you've ever seen the movie Free Willy, this is where Keiko, the orca, went to, I think, you know, live out the rest of its days. And you also have the Hatfield Marine Science Center. You also have the Seafood and Wine Festival in Newport, which is something I've never attended, but I've heard it's a ton of fun. And both towns are going to have activities and events going on, in particular in the warmer months. You know, if you're looking at from like April in the spring, you know, probably through like October in the fall. I think with things to do, it kind of depends on your lifestyle, what you're looking for, what you want to get out and do. Again, Lincoln City probably has a little more access to hiking, biking, some of the outdoor stuff, but Newport is probably a little bit more scenic. You have the big, beautiful Bay Bridge, you're on the bay, but you also have these beautiful beaches there. So maybe it's a wash, I don't know. All right, so next we're gonna talk about food. I think both towns, Newport, Lincoln City, are pretty comparable as far as food goes. You know, these are towns that, again, really cater to tourists. and tourism. So you get a lot of nicer, fancier restaurants. But, these towns, which you don't get in every place on the Oregon coast, have a lot of options as far as just kind of local diners, fast casual. They both have fast food, which you can't find in some Oregon coast towns. And whether or not that's important to you, that's going to be a case-by-case basis. But I think as far as food goes, if you look at the ratings on Yelp, if you look at what both towns offer, both towns have some really great high-rated restaurants, probably pretty similar as far as the quantity of what's offered as well. One thing, again, to note is that in Newport, you're on the Yaquina Bay, on that Bay Boulevard, so there are restaurants there. You have some bayfront dining. There's probably not as much beachfront or oceanfront dining as there might be in Lincoln City. But in Newport, you also have Nye Beach, which is that really cool little beachfront neighborhood where you have restaurants and you're just blocks from the beach. So, there are options as far as beachfront dining in both areas. I think both areas have a lot of options as far as food goes. And again, I think I would say that this is probably a wash as far as food goes. All right, so let's talk about jobs. The biggest industry on the Oregon coast, no doubt, is tourism. And these are towns that are pretty big. So, there's a lot of hotels, there's a lot of short-term rentals, there's a lot of restaurants, there's a lot of service and hospitality type jobs that are available. Both towns, if you look on Indeed.com, which is a pretty good barometer, have about 1,200 job openings. So it's more or less similar, and that makes sense given the primary industries in these towns, and also given the fact that they're both about 10,000 people as far as population. So very similar in size. It's going to be very similar as far as how many jobs are available, but what types of jobs are you going to find? Again, beyond tourism, which is the biggest industry on the Oregon coast, you're definitely going to find a lot of jobs that are, kind of support the local infrastructure, financial, legal, housing, and then city jobs, and also, jobs in the public sector, police, firefighters, things like that. So I think, really the biggest thing to note here is that it seems that Newport is a little bit more science oriented, where you have, again, the Hatfield Marine Science Center, which I believe is affiliated with Oregon State University. There is the Oregon Coast Aquarium, which is definitely going to create more jobs, kind of in that space than Lincoln City, which doesn't have an aquarium. There's also NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, actually recently moved their research fleet from Seattle to Newport, Oregon. So I think there's like over 100 ships in that fleet, and there's potentially going to be opportunities, in those fields. But if you're moving to the Oregon coast to work at any of those places, you probably already know that to some extent. So you could still be looking at Newport and Lincoln City. And if you worked in Newport, you could live in Lincoln City, or vice versa, because the commute really isn't that bad. Again, it's about 30 minutes away. So it's a pretty quick drive, and it's also a pretty drive. So if you like to spend a little more time in the car, maybe, listen to a podcast, you could live in one, commute to the other, or vice versa. Both towns also have hospitals, part of the Samaritan Health Network, so they are affiliated. Both towns are going to have jobs in healthcare more so than other towns on the Oregon coast, because there are hospitals there. That definitely is a great benefit that we'll talk about. When it comes down to it, if you look at the median household income for Lincoln City is $40,000. The median household income for Newport is $50,000. So quite a discrepancy there. If you're looking at Lincoln City being 20% less as far as median household income, I don't know exactly what you could contribute that to. Again, both towns are going to have a lot of jobs kind of around the tourism industry, but as far as other industries are concerned, Newport might have a few more high-paying jobs, again, if you just look at that median household income. So we'll give the nod to Newport on this one. All right, so healthcare. This is something that a lot of people ask us about if they're relocating to the Oregon coast. What is their access to healthcare going to be like? If you look up and down the Oregon coast, there are a lot of towns that are very, very small. Even Lincoln City and Newport, we're talking about 10,000 people. So odds are where you're coming from is much bigger than where you're relocating to on the Oregon coast. Luckily, these two towns, Newport, Lincoln City, they both have hospitals. Like I mentioned, they are both in the Samaritan Health Network. In Lincoln City, you have the Samaritan North Lincoln Hospital. In Newport, you have the Samaritan Pacific Hospital. So I really don't have a ton of information on what services are offered at each hospital, but again, these towns are in close enough proximity that if you need something done that is only offered in one town, but you live in the other, it's not going to be a huge deal necessarily. So luckily, these are two towns that have hospitals, which is pretty rare on the Oregon coast. Most towns up and down the Oregon coast have small clinics, family practices, things like that. And there's almost always going to be a hospital within, I don't know, maybe an hour's drive. But luckily, again, in Lincoln City and Newport, you have hospitals right there in town. So both of these places are going to be rated a little bit higher in terms of your access to healthcare. So again, it's going to be a wash here. All right, let's talk about the thing that is often the elephant in the room, crime. I know a lot of people look on Reddit and different forums if they're thinking about relocating to the Oregon coast. Crime, drug use, homelessness, those are things that come up. And like we've talked about in other videos, this really is all relative depending on where you're coming from. Each of those things probably get a little bit overstated as far as how much you see of that and what the exposure is to crime, homelessness, drug use, and whether or not, of course, you're in danger or if it's something that you should be concerned about. So what I'm about to talk about is public data. Definitely don't want to steer anyone in one direction or another. That's not our job. I think, again, a lot of this can be overstated as far as whether or not this really should be a concern. But Lincoln City does rate slightly above the national average when it comes to violent crime, and it's about 50% higher when it comes to property crime. So, if we're talking about theft and things like that. And then if you look at Newport is well below the national average when it comes to violent crime and right about the national average when it comes to property crime. So, I haven't heard a ton of stories from people in these areas about, feeling unsafe or feeling like they're in danger necessarily. The statistics certainly aren't something that, you necessarily want to ignore. And, depending on your lifestyle, where you want to live, what's important to you, these are always going to be things that you want to take into consideration. And we can always point you, in the right direction as far as getting more answers to these questions that you might have around safety and crime and things like that. But I would say, based on these numbers, it does seem like Newport might be a little bit of a safer place. But at the same time, again, I've never really heard of an enormous issue in Lincoln City. So, these are very small towns as well. So if you look at 10,000 people per town, compared to a national average, well, most towns, are going to be a lot bigger than this. And this is going to be, rated kind of, at the same scale as, big cities, big metro areas and things like that. The numbers only say so much. Again, it really has to do with, are you going to be safe in these areas? And I think, the Oregon coast as a whole, there's just really not a ton to worry about. All right, let's talk about housing. You're probably watching this video because you're considering moving to the Oregon coast. So we want to talk about what it's like to buy a house here. What are you going to be up against and what is the market like? Well, in Lincoln City, the median home price is $490,000. That's up 33% in the last 12 months. So that is an enormous increase as far as home values go. That is well above the national average. But if you look at an area like this in a destination that has become pretty desirable for people to relocate to, and in a town that is so small, there's only so many homes available. And as demand continues to increase, the supply, inventory is low across the country, so inventory is historically low in Lincoln City as well, but there's only so many homes, and if demand continues to rise, that's going to continue to prop up the home values as far as what homes are selling for. So as of filming this, there are 213 homes on the market in Lincoln City, and the average is 53 days on market. Probably, if you really work toward the median And if you look at homes that are desirable, homes that, you know, don't need a ton of work, or, you know, are kind of in that median price range, the average days on market is probably closer to a week or two. That's really what we're seeing. So, you know, that number can be a little bit misleading, but still, if you look at it in terms of a national average or a historic average, where days on market in terms of an average, even in recent history, creeped up to 70, 80, 100 days. And so, you know, homes are selling very quickly. You know, it's definitely a competitive market. And there are some unique market conditions when you look at the Oregon coast, because at the Oregon coast, you know, there are full-time residents, of course. There are people who are buying a second home or vacation home that they use part-time. And then there's also investors. There's people who are buying homes, you know, to use as short-term rentals. So you're kind of working against a lot of different market segments that you're not necessarily working against when you look at a standard market. You know, the tourism aspect of the Oregon coast can't be understated, and it has a huge impact on housing. You know, we do see a lot of competition. We do see multiple offers commonly, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get into a house. From what I can gather in my own experience, the market is certainly competitive, but you might be competing with multiple offers, 3, 4, 5 offers. You're probably not going to be competing with 20, 25, 30 offers. You're probably not going to be seeing homes selling for $100,000 over asking price, even $50,000 over asking price. It can happen. We've seen it happen, but you know, this is what you're seeing in a lot of metro areas in particular, a lot of really hot markets. You're not seeing that as much on the Oregon coast, but you know, you definitely want to prepare yourself for these market conditions. Now, let's talk about Newport. In Newport, the median sale price is $470,000, and that's up 27%. Still an astronomical number, you know, not quite that 33% that we see in Lincoln City. And there's actually 122 homes on the market as of filming this video. So almost 100 less homes for sale than Lincoln City. And then the average days on market is actually 67 days. So homes are sitting a little bit longer. There's not as many homes for sale. But the average sale price is slightly below Lincoln City. So, you know, looking at those numbers as far as, you know, buying behavior for homes between these two towns, Lincoln City actually is the hotter market, which again, there are a lot of very desirable things about Lincoln City. There's a lot of very desirable things about Newport, and you don't just want to do what everybody else is doing, you know, for sure, but Newport feels like a little bit of a strange market. Again, I think with Lincoln City, you definitely have probably more people from the Portland metro area who are buying second homes and vacation homes there, maybe not quite as much in Newport. So that might have something to do with it. You know, Newport is actually a little bit more of a balanced market as far as median sale price, days on market, and some of those other, you know, statistics that we talked about. So the thing though is there are a lot less homes for sale. Inventory is lower in Newport. So even though it's a little bit more of a balanced market, there's still just not as many options to look at. I think that in Newport, you can probably expect similar conditions when you look at homes that are, you know, getting a lot of interest. You know, there's kind of that margin, that median range where a lot of people are looking, in particular where you're competing with, you know, second home buyers and investors and full-time residents. Ultimately, you know, what it comes down to, if you do want to buy a home in either of these areas, is working with a team that is going to have a feel for the market and is going to be able to communicate and act quickly. So we want to be able to figure out, okay, there's a home listed, we like it, let's talk to the listing agent, let's understand what's important to the seller, let's understand what's going to ultimately win us an offer. When we start to go through these steps, we don't want to be in a position where we continue to get let down, writing offer after offer. You know, we want to put you in the best position to ultimately get the job done. So we've talked about Lincoln City and Newport. There are a lot of things that these towns have in common, but there are a lot of differences as well. These are two areas where we get some of the most interest as far as people relocating to the Oregon coast. They're centrally located. They have a lot of great amenities, fantastic beaches, very scenic, very beautiful. And so if you are considering either of these areas, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, or click the link below in the description of this video and schedule a Zoom call with us. We can talk about your home search, your timeline, and ultimately build up a game plan for you. If this video is helpful, hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. We really appreciate you watching, and until next time, we'll talk to you later.